"You're smart, but this isn't your lane." That's what he said, right there, in front of the entire boardroom. And they laughed loud and clear, not because I was wrong, but because I was a woman. They thought I was only good for blueprints, hard hats, and silence. Not bold enough, not powerful enough, not man enough. I didn't argue. I didn't say a word. But I walked away from that table, quietly built my own company, quietly invested, quietly bought out the very highway he used to oversee. Opening day. My name stood tall on the steel sign at the city's busiest interchange, developed by Ava Coleman, Chief Executive Officer. I didn't stay in my lane. I bought the whole highway. My name is Ava Coleman, and for 8 long years I kept my head down, did the work, followed every rule, met every deadline. I thought that would be enough. I joined the Dallas Department of Transportation right after graduating from Texas A&M. I was the only black woman in my unit. Only woman, period. Most of the time. They gave me the worst neighborhoods. The ones nobody wanted to manage. Bad roads, tight budgets, no recognition. I fixed them. Quietly. Then they gave me the overflow projects. Sidewalks no one finished. Drainage plans that got scrapped. Guess who stayed late and pulled them together? Me. And yet when promotion season came, nothing. I'd walk into meetings where my name was on every page of the project brief, and they'd thank someone else for the work. Mostly men, mostly Thomas. Thomas Grant was a regional director. He was charming, confident, the kind of guy that got credit even when he walked into the room 5 minutes late. He never missed a chance to mentor me. You know the type. Lots of "you're doing great for your level." And not bad, considering how young you are. Once, when I proposed a redesign for a downtown interchange, he just laughed. "Ambitious, Ava," he said, patting my folder. "But this is bigger than your lane." My lane? I started hearing that word everywhere. Whenever I had an idea too bold, that wasn't my lane. Whenever I challenged a budget proposal, not my lane. Even when I offered to help with something outside of my exact job title. "Stay in your lane, Ava." So I did. I stayed in the lane they gave me and I turned it into a damn highway. Every late night, every missed weekend, every time I bit my tongue while someone else took the mic, I was building something they couldn't see. A reputation. And a map. A map of which cities needed what, which contractors cut corners, which officials were tired of the old boys club and ready for change. I was collecting data. Not just the kind you input in a spreadsheet, the kind you only gather by listening, by showing up, by being overlooked. And I used every bit of it. By the 5th year, I was managing more miles of road than any other project lead in the department. Still no raise, still no title, but I kept going, because I knew my value didn't need their approval. It needed a plan, and that plan started forming the day I saw Thomas take credit for the 635 connector. My idea, my model. He didn't even bother to edit the numbers. He presented it to the city council as his vision for a smarter Dallas. And they applauded. That was the moment, the exact moment I decided, I won't stay in the lane you built for me. I'll build my own, and one day you'll be driving on it. With my name on the sign, the night after Thomas stole my pitch, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, replaying every word, every smirk, every nod of approval he got, with my numbers, my research, my vision. I wasn't angry. I was finished. Finished waiting, finished asking, finished hoping someone would open the door. That's when the plan started. At first, it was just a whisper in the back of my mind. What if I didn't need their table? What if I built my own? I spent the next month doing 2 jobs. By day, I was still Ava, the project manager, smiling, submitting reports, staying in my lane. But by night, I was Ava, the architect of escape. I took online business classes. I read every contract I had ever signed. I started building a business plan for what I called CIG Coleman Infrastructure Group. I didn't tell a soul. This was mine. I wanted to build something on my terms. Not something to prove them wrong, but something to prove me right. I liquidated my savings, took out a small business loan. I even sold the car my parents gave me after college. That one hurt. But I needed startup capital. And more than that, I needed commitment. I wasn't dabbling, I was jumping. I registered my LLC in Texas. I filed for a state contractor license. And I rented the smallest office space I could find, a 10x10 room behind a plumbing supply store off Beltline Road. It smelled like copper and mildew, but it was mine. I put up a dry erase board and wrote 5 words across the top. Build what they said I couldn't. Then I started cold calling. Every small town official, every rural county commissioner, every city clerk I'd ever met, I reached out. I didn't pitch big. I didn't talk ego. I just asked, what do you need fixed? And the answers came flooding in. Potholes in Wiley, collapsed culverts in Midlothian, flooded alleys in Corsicana. These weren't glamorous contracts. They weren't on the news. But they were real, and most of all, they were ignored, which made them perfect. My bids were small, my margins tight. I took the contracts no one else bothered with. I worked with skeleton crews guys I knew from my years in the field. We rented equipment. We worked double shifts. I brought coffee. I picked up trash. There was no pride too high for me. And slowly, things started moving. CIG completed 15 jobs in 9 months. Word got around. Reliable, fast, professional. That's what they called us. Even though we were operating out of a closet, I didn't care. Because the roads we fixed didn't care either. They didn't care who signed the contract, they cared that someone showed up. And I always showed up. I built a team, a real one. By the second year, we had a proper office, a receptionist, 3 project managers. And then, the opportunity came. The Texas Infrastructure Redevelopment Board announced a new initiative revamped the I-635 interchange, the exact project Thomas had stolen from me years ago. This was different, bigger, statewide visibility, multi-million-dollar budget, national contractors involved, and still one part of the bid was open to independents. Section 4C, lateral bypass design and construction. It wasn't the centerpiece, but it was significant, and I knew it better than anyone. Because I had designed the original version, I spent 2 nights rewriting that proposal, adding every lesson I'd learned in the field, every mistake I'd seen others make. It wasn't flashy, it was smart, efficient, cost-effective, human. I submitted it under CIG's name. And then I waited. 3 weeks later, I got the call. We were shortlisted, final interviews in Austin. I flew in with my team, 3 of us, no suits, just field boots and rolled-up sleeves. I walked into the conference room and saw Thomas across the table. His face froze. He was bidding too, except this time, he didn't recognize the game, because this time I was the competitor, and I had come to win. Thomas didn't say a word to me, but his eyes did. He scanned my badge, read the name, and I watched it click. Coleman Infrastructure Group. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost, but I wasn't a ghost. I was a storm. The interview was structured. 15 minutes. 4 board members, 1 pitch. Thomas went before me. He brought slides, stats, consultants. He talked about innovation like it was a brand name. He mentioned his experience a lot. Then it was my turn. I walked to the front with no projector, just a folder. Inside photos of the roads we fixed, before and after shots, small towns, big changes. Then I said, you don't need another speech. You need someone who shows up. I talked about my crews, how we trained local labor, how we cut costs without cutting corners. And finally, I said something I hadn't planned to say. My design was stolen 5 years ago, but I didn't fight for credit. I went and earned it. Then I left. We flew back to Dallas. 3 days passed. Then 5. On the 6th day, the email came in. Subject award notice, section 4C. I clicked it. Awarded to Coleman Infrastructure Group, how? We won. I stared at the screen for 10 full minutes. Not because I doubted it, but because it finally felt real. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space I was never supposed to reach. It was about walking into a world that was built to exclude me and building my own door. The moment I told my team, they screamed. We hugged, we cried. We celebrated in a parking lot with food truck tacos and cheap sparkling cider. But inside, I was calm, because I knew this was just the beginning. I wasn't here to prove anything anymore. I was here to build the kind of infrastructure that actually serves people, that puts safety over shortcuts, that puts dignity over politics. And the best part, Thomas would have to drive past our sign every week. Because my company wasn't just building Section 4C. We were about to bid for the expansion of 4D, 5A, and 5B. And this time I wasn't coming to participate. I was coming to dominate. Winning the Section 4C bid wasn't the end. It was the ignition. The moment that contract was announced, everything changed. My inbox exploded. Small towns, mid-sized cities, even private developers. Everyone suddenly wanted Coleman Infrastructure Group. Some wanted us because of the press. Others wanted us because they were tired of the same three bloated firms charging triple and delivering half. But the truth, most of them didn't care who I was, until I walked in the room. Then they blinked. Ava Coleman, a young black woman in charge of a multimillion-dollar highway project. Some tried to hide their surprise, others didn't even bother. There was a moment in Tyler, Texas. I walked into a negotiation for a bypass redesign. The city engineer shook my project manager's hand, looked past me, and said, "So when's the boss arriving?" I smiled. "I'm already here." He blinked, then blinked again. I kept smiling. Because I wasn't just building highways, I was paving over every assumption they ever had about leadership. And slowly, my reputation stopped being a shock. It started becoming a signal. Ava's name on a bid meant three things. Your roads would be done on time, you wouldn't get nickel and dimed, and the work would last. We started hiring more engineers, more site inspectors, more field crews, and more women. I made it a point to mentor young female engineers, especially those who were told, like I once was, to stay in their lane. I'd bring them to every site visit, every pitch, because I knew when you see someone like you lead, you stop thinking it's impossible. And I needed them to believe it was possible. But not everyone was thrilled, especially Thomas. His firm, well, the one he partnered with, kept losing bids. Not just to me, but to smaller firms inspired by what CIG had done. There was a shift. People were finally asking, why do we keep handing millions to the same names, when others are doing more with less? It wasn't a revolution, but it was the start of one. Then came the big one, Phase 2 of the I-635 project, Section 5B. It was a massive contract, bridge expansion, sound wall retrofitting, smart traffic system integration. And once again, CIG was invited to bid. But this time, Thomas wasn't on the list. He'd been cut out. Conflict of interest, they said. Word was, someone finally traced the numbers from that original stolen proposal and realized he had submitted a slightly tweaked version of my 5-year-old draft. It was enough to blacklist him quietly. He didn't get sued, didn't get fired, just sidelined. Corporate exile, and I got the green light. We won 5B. It was the biggest contract of my life. But I didn't celebrate with champagne. I celebrated by visiting every single neighborhood that would be impacted. I asked parents what routes their kids took to school. I asked seniors where sidewalks failed them. I met with bus drivers, EMTs, janitors, single moms. Because the roads aren't for the boardroom, they're for the people. And if I was going to pour concrete in their city, they had a right to help shape it. Those months were brutal. 16-hour days, rain delays, budget adjustments. But every problem, we faced it. And when the last pylon was sealed, when the last traffic light lit up green, I stood at the edge of the new bridge watching traffic move. Smooth, safe, steady. A father in a minivan gave me a thumbs up as he passed. And I smiled, because I had built this, not just the structure, but the path. For every little girl who was told she wasn't tough enough, for every employee who watched someone else take credit, for every woman who had to raise her voice just to be heard. This was for them. And I wasn't done. Because one day, the same people who said I should stay in my lane, they'd realize I didn't just change lanes. I designed the whole damn map. There's a moment you don't forget. Not a loud one, not an award, not a press headline. Just a quiet shift. A moment when you look around and realize this world no longer feels foreign. You belong. And for me, that moment came in a courthouse. It wasn't even about me. It was about a lawsuit. A city contractor accused of skimming funds during a federal road repair. I wasn't named in the suit. But CIG had been called in later to fix what the first firm left behind. I was subpoenaed to testify as an expert. When I walked into that courtroom wearing a hard hat and heels because I'd come straight from a job site, I didn't expect anyone to notice. But the judge looked up and said, "Ms. Coleman, thank you for being here. Your work is well known." I froze for half a second. Then I nodded. That small line meant more than any ceremony ever could. Because once upon a time, I was the girl no one called by name. Now I was the name. After court, I went back to the office. The team had just closed another deal, this one in San Antonio. A new commuter route near an underserved neighborhood. Smart lighting. Pedestrian-first design. Flood control. It wasn't flashy, but it would change lives. I stared at the map on the wall. Each red pin was a completed job. Each green one was an active site. There were dozens now, across the state, across the years. Each one a story, each one a middle finger to the system that tried to leave me behind. And yet, something still lingered. Not anger, not bitterness, curiosity. I hadn't seen Thomas in almost 2 years. Not since the day our names shared a bidding room. But one morning, I opened my email and there it was. Subject line coffee. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I reread it 3 times. Thomas Grant, same email, same signature. He wanted to meet. Part of me wanted to delete it. But another part, the part that had walked through fire and come out steel, clicked reply. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., downtown, my office. When he walked in, he looked different, less polished, more tired. He glanced at the receptionist, then saw me in the glass-walled conference room. Still running your empire out of here, he asked, half a smirk on his lips. I looked up from my laptop. No, we bought the building last month. He paused, then sat down. There was a long silence. Then he said, "You did it." I waited. "I didn't think you'd go this far." I nodded slowly. "You weren't supposed to." Another pause. Then he looked me straight in the eye. I was wrong. I leaned back, measured. About what, my ideas, my leadership? Or the fact that I didn't need your approval to succeed? He smiled sadly. All of it. It wasn't satisfying. Not the way I imagined it. Because this wasn't a movie. This was real. I wasn't here to make him feel small. I was here to stand tall. He stood to leave, but before he did, he turned and asked, "How did you stay so quiet?" I looked at him. I wasn't quiet, I was building. After he left, I closed my laptop, then walked to the window. The skyline stretched wide before me. And I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who was told to stay in her lane. And I whispered to her, "You were never meant to stay in any lane. You were born to build the whole damn highway." That afternoon, I called a meeting with my senior team. We weren't going to coast on past wins. We were expanding, not just in Texas, but nationwide. We'd already had inquiries from Arizona, Colorado, and Georgia. So I asked the team, what would it take to build a regional office in each quadrant of the country? They stared at me. Then one of them, Jamila, my lead engineer, grinned. "It would take a plan, but if it's your plan, we're in." That night, I sat alone in the office, no lights, just the city humming below. And I thought about the road, not the literal ones, though they mattered deeply. I thought about the invisible roads, the ones no one paves for people like me. For women, for Black women, for first-generation builders who weren't handed the keys. I thought about all the lanes I was told to stay in and all the walls I had quietly replaced with windows. I remembered every snide remark, every project stolen, every meeting where I was invisible. And then I looked down at my hands. Calloused, steady. These were builders' hands. Not just of roads or buildings, but of futures. And the future I wanted wasn't just one where I succeeded. It was one where success like mine wasn't rare. So I made a new mission. For every contract we accepted, we'd train 5 interns. Paid, mentored, tracked. I didn't want to be a symbol. I wanted to be a door. 2 months later, we broke ground on our Denver office. 6 women ran that site. 3 were first-generation college grads. When the mayor came for the ribbon cutting, he asked, "How did you find such a strong team?" I smiled. They were always here. Someone just had to trust them. I got back in my car, looked in the rearview mirror, and whispered to myself, "No more lanes. Just legacy, legacy." It's a word people love to throw around on plaques, in speeches, in donation letters. But I've learned something. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build in plain sight, while no one is watching. And for me, it looked like this. I was standing on a stage in New York, a national transportation conference. They had just announced me as Innovator of the Year. There was applause, cameras, reporters, but I didn't hear any of it. I was thinking about the girl who used to eat lunch in her car because the office didn't feel safe. I was thinking about the younger me who had once rehearsed how to say "excuse me" loud enough to be heard in a boardroom. I was thinking about how far she had come and how much further I still wanted to go. When they handed me the mic, I paused, then said, "I used to be told to stay in my lane. Now, I help draw the blueprints." Laughter, applause. But I wasn't done. Real innovation isn't about louder voices. It's about who gets heard. It's about designing systems that don't require you to fight just to be seen. I don't want to be the first. I want to be one of many. Let's make that the legacy. That speech went viral. But it wasn't the speech that mattered. It was what came next. 2 weeks later, I got a letter, handwritten, torn edges, no return address. Inside was a note. You spoke for people like me. Thank you. No signature. I cried. Because sometimes the most powerful recognition comes from the silent ones, the ones still building their own roads. Back in Dallas, we launched a scholarship fund. It wasn't huge, but it was focused. Women of color, STEM majors, first generation. We called it the Blueprint Fund. For those rewriting their own maps, applications poured in. I read every one. Stories of struggle, of grit, of brilliance buried under debt and doubt. And I saw myself. Every time I visited high schools, sat in back row auditoriums, talked to girls who didn't know they could be engineers until someone told them they could. I wasn't interested in being famous. I was interested in being possible. Then one day, I got a call. A state representative wanted to honor me on the floor of the Texas House. I thanked him, then declined. Not out of pride, but because I had something else planned. We were about to break ground on our most ambitious project, yet an all-electric, solar-integrated transit corridor outside Houston. It would reduce commute times by 40%, lower emissions by 60%, and serve thousands of working-class families. And guess what? The project manager, a 27-year-old woman from the very scholarship fund we launched. Her name was Letitia, and she was fierce. I stood behind her at the press conference, silent, proud. She didn't need me to speak. She had found her own voice. Afterward, a reporter asked if I had advice for her. I said, she doesn't need advice. She needs room. And that's what we're building, roads that create room for more voices. The article ran the next day with a headline. Ava Coleman isn't just building highways, she's building possibility. I framed that one. Not for vanity, but as a reminder that revenge is loud, but legacy is quiet. It moves through foundation beams. It echoes in morning alarms set by women chasing deadlines. It rolls through freshly paved roads and into the dreams of girls who were never told they could. Until now, that night, I walked through our main office empty, glowing with soft light. Desks with blueprints, coffee mugs half full, boots by the door. Signs of builders? And I knew this was never about proving Thomas wrong. It was about proving myself right. About reclaiming every inch of space I was told didn't belong to me, and using it to build something bigger than anger. Bigger than ego? Bigger than me. I walked out to the rooftop, looked over the city, and I smiled. Not because I reached the destination, but because I finally owned the road